Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary. Happy Thursday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We have some breaking news from the hockey world as the Toronto Maple Leafs have fired head coach Sheldon Keefe. We will also be looking at the playoff games from last night in both the NHL and the NBA. So, we have a lot to get to. Let's get to it and start talking some hockey. The Toronto Maple Leafs have announced that they have let go of head coach Sheldon Keefe after a lengthy time with the organization. The Toronto Maple Leafs announcing today that Keefe has been relieved of his duties with the organization and the search for a new head coach begins. This was absolutely the move that the Leafs had to make. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. This was the move the Leafs had to make. This was not the move that fixes the Leafs. This is not this cannot be the big move of the offseason for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It can be a big move for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but this team did not lose in the first round to the Boston Bruins, in the second round to the Tampa Bay Lightning, in the first round to Columbus and Montreal and Tampa Bay and Washington and Boston and all those guys. They didn't lose every time with Sheldon Keefe simply because of Sheldon Keefe. But I don't think he did enough to help things. And obviously, when he is talking to the media and discussing different things, you're not getting 100% of everything, obviously. But when he's going to the media, well, the effort's there. It's like, yeah, Leaf fans don't need to hear about the effort. They need to know why this team is losing. Honestly, effort would be more comforting. If the effort wasn't there, then you can fix effort. You can't fix skill and lack of cohesion. And there was never, it just felt like any time the other team would make an adjustment or anything like that, Keefe was a little bit slow on the uptick. And look, I think Sheldon Keefe is a pretty good coach. He's got this team to over 100 points a bunch of times. But to get this team over the hump, he just isn't the right guy for this group. I don't know if the message wore thin or what it was, but this never really worked. And I do think he was put in a very difficult position because this is obviously now a core that just doesn't work together in a way that is successful in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And there were a number of times where you could tell he was really frustrated with things and he would call out a Marner or a Matthews or a Nylander in the media and then have to come back with his tail between his legs and be like, I'm sorry. And I don't think that earned him the respect in that room, and I don't think it put him in the best possible situation. So this is a move that they had to make. If he is just the scapegoat, then that is not enough, and Toronto was just going to be back into what they needed to, or going to go back into what they have been for the last little while. Sorry, and that is a bitter disappointment of a hockey team. The roster needs to be changed, but this is honestly a coach that survived longer than he probably would have under any other general manager. And that is, I guess, a credit to his relationship building. But this was a move that had to be made. And it was probably a couple of years too late to get this thing back on the tracks for the Maple Leafs. But Dubas' entire reputation was kind of banking on Sheldon Keefe being that guy. And it didn't really work. And now the Leafs are in a really difficult spot. This is probably the most important coaching hire the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to make in a really long time, because I would guess that a major roster move is coming, and now this coach is going to be tasked with finally trying to get this team over that hump. And if this one doesn't work, I don't know what the answer is. And I think that is a bigger picture question here with the Toronto Maple Leafs. The thought is, okay, yeah, you go out, you trade Marner, let's say. You bring in a couple pieces with that money, you spread the depth out, and this team's going to be golden. But what if it isn't? What if this doesn't work? Like what we're talking about making a big move here. What happens if it still doesn't work? Like how far does it go before you have to make real drastic changes? So honestly, that might have been one of the reasons why Toronto didn't make those moves in the first place, is like, okay, well, yeah, but if we break glass in case of emergency and that still doesn't put the fire out, what do we do then? but Toronto is definitely in a spot where they absolutely have to be making these moves. Shifting gears now to the teams that are still in the playoffs. The Vancouver Canucks with an incredible come from behind 5-4 win over the Edmonton Oilers last night, and full marks to Vancouver. I thought you saw the concerns that people had, specifically me, in the beginning part of this game. Defensively, they were in shambles. Some just atrocious turnovers, some horrendous defensive zone play and coverage, and that led to Edmonton getting a quick start. Also, I get the Hyman shot was deflected by Myers. Seelovs needs to have that one. He was fine, but there was a couple of times where you could see this was a big moment for him. And so you have the concerns like, man, and I even said watching this game, like to start, it was everything at Edmonton's pace, and it felt like Vancouver was just white knuckled, like, oh my gosh. And Edmonton was out for just like, yeah, no, this is what we do. And then slowly that started to shift into Vancouver's favor a little bit, and they started to get going. And I think this is where the experience edge for Edmonton came into play, is that they had quite a few days off, but they knew what to expect. They came in and they really took it to Vancouver. But as this game went on, Vancouver got their legs back after a lengthy layoff, and they're like, hey, no, we're pretty good at this. And they started to dictate the pace, and they started to control this game in a way that was more favorable to them. And that was not something I was anticipating this team being able to do. I thought this game was going to be at Edmonton's pace, and Vancouver was going to have to catch up. And there were certain times where they did have to kind of catch up, and they did. And so that is, I think, a real boost for this Vancouver team to be able to hang in there with Edmonton during Edmonton while this game was being played in the Oilers style, and then be able to hard turn this thing back into the way they wanted to. That is some really, really great stuff. And again, it is the depth pieces for Vancouver that come up. Pettersson was okay. And you get Besser and Miller combining on a goal, but it's Garland getting a breakaway. It's Joshua going to the front of the goal. It's Lindholm. I thought this was probably Lindholm's best game of the playoffs, throwing one in front, and it ends up banking in. It's those type of players who stepped up for the Vancouver Canucks and gave them this lead in this series. So that is it is just such a huge boost to this Vancouver Canuck team to be able to have that, and to be able to now pocket that victory up 1-0 in this series.